Hi everyone, welcome to Off the Podium. I have a friend who I haven't seen in I don't know how many years. Graham, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So, what's going on the past 10 years or so?
Whew. I'll see how well I can summarize it. Well, we met during undergrad, and that was a whirlwind of an experience of learning about living in a city, learning about new musics and old musics and a whole bunch of musics that were brand new to me at the time. And all I knew by the time I graduated was that I didn't know very much and that I wanted to know a whole lot more. The grad school seemed like a good idea, and that I loved playing music by composers that I actually knew. Yeah. So I took a year to get my life in order, to get my chops in order, practicing a bunch, researching graduate programs, and ended up, applying, auditioning, and going off to the Yale School of Music from 2010 to 2012. And if I can summarize that experience in a couple of words, it was the first time that I heard common era classical music performed really well by people who dedicate their lives to say Schubert, Schumann, Beethoven, this sort of thing. So in a way, my music education was backwards. I started with new music and worked backwards to classical music. There I discovered the joys of early music, historically informed performance practice, musicological and ethnomusicological research, paradigms, and just the joys of being at a proper research university as opposed to a conservatory. So graduating there, I knew that I knew even less than I did when I was at Cornish, and I still wanted to learn more, and I wanted to fill out my research shops and my foreign language shops. So I enrolled in a research performance program in the Italian region of Switzerland, and was in residence there for 2 years. I wrote a small dissertation that I don't think anybody read, and studied with my favorite guitarist on the planet, Lorenzo Micheli. He's an Italian guitarist, just exquisite human, exquisite musician. And following that, I decided to move to Toronto, Canada. I'm a dual citizen, born and raised in the United States, but I've been spending a bunch of my time in Canada since I was born and wanted to see what it's like to live there. I was sort of split between doing a PhD in ethnomusicology or doing a DMA, which I was significantly better prepared for. However, I wanted to write a DMA treatise that was more ethno than, say, performance-based. I pitched my ideas to the gentleman who's now my supervisor at the University of Toronto, Jeffrey McFadden, Dr. Jeffrey McFadden, and he said, yeah, sure, that sounds fine. We'd love to support a project like that. So I'm now trying to wrap up my DMA studies at the University of Toronto.
First off, this is the first time I'm doing this podcast in person. I've never done it. But it's also great to meet a friend I've known 10 years ago or so. But the thing about guitarists that's always fascinating to me, as a violinist coming from an orchestral background, I'm a flute player coming from an orchestral background, you go to music school and you study flute, and there's a specific kind of a path that leads you through your life. But with guitarists, it's kind of different. Sometimes you end up just picking up the guitar and playing, and then it kind of leads you to these different directions. What was your path?
This is absolutely the case. The guitar, at least in North America, where the nylon string instrument isn't an indigenous instrument, we could say. So many of us come from a no-school approach, and I'm definitely one of them. I was trained in my public school program, as so many of us are in the States. I was trained first very briefly on the viola, and then later as a trumpet player, which I played in school band and local community bands. Let me see, from 5th to 10th grade or so. I took it seriously, but I never loved it. For me, I didn't like the athleticism of playing the trumpet, but I loved making music with the trumpet, of course. Of course, around the time that this was happening, the hormones were kicking in, and when I was in 6th grade, some kid came into my music class and played a couple of chords from In Bloom by Nirvana on a Fender Strat through a tiny little amplifier, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do. That's it. That's what I want. So I went home, explained all this to my mother. She pulled out her ancient nylon string guitar. She put my fingers in the shape of a G or a G7 and said, okay, strum it. And I did, and I broke all the strings. I spent the first couple of days of my guitar career learning how to restring a guitar. And from there, it was a bunch of tabs in Guitar World and, getting on the young internet with my 14.4 modem and waiting, like look up some Nirvana guitar tabs, go downstairs, eat dinner with the family, come upstairs. They're mostly loaded. Print them out on the spindle printers, that have the things that you tear off the sides. And that was guitar for me for the first 3, 4, 5 years, something like this, through middle school and high school.
Wow.
I played a little bit in the jazz band and explained or sort of figured out a little bit of reading from my experience with the trumpet.
Yeah.
Right. There's a bunch of things that came later, like for example, that guitar music is of course written in transposition, way over my head at the time, and so on and so forth. But I was playing in rock bands. I was really into like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and that sort of thing. I suppose I still am.
Yeah.
And found my way to classical music via my guitar teacher. I finally started taking lessons at the end of high school because my bandmates said, you're all right, but you could be better, right?
Yeah.
And I had this funny guitar teacher who was something of a rocker who loved classical music, certain classical musics, because of the way they'd been appropriated by certain rock musicians. Yeah. So for him, he was really into like Yngwie Malmsteen, and thus also into like Paganini and Bach violin sonatas and partitas and that sort of thing. Yeah. And I expressed interest in learning how to read, or increasing my reading facility. And he played a trick on me. He gave me some etudes that you can't really play with a pick because they're arpeggio studies. And I tried so hard to do this, doopy sort of thing, jumping across all these strings, and finally said, well, forget this, and I started playing with my fingers. Yeah. And then once I discovered, the ability to play polyphony on the guitar, that was it for me. I just wanted to keep playing with my fingers and work my way towards classical guitar from there. Yeah.
Well, you said you've played a lot of new music or composers that you've known. Mm-hmm. First, what's the importance of that? I mean, I know the importance, but what would you say is the importance of new music? There's hundreds of pieces for guitar. Why write new stuff, and why play new stuff?
Right. Well, to me, the relationship between music and culture is a nebulous but important one. Yeah. Right? It's profound, and it has multiple significances, some of which are self-agreeing, some of which aren't self-agreeing. Yeah. But regardless, there is a tie between the music that we make and the people that we are. Yeah. And to me, to be involved with music making that attempts to describe or push against or get in the middle of or illuminate or pick a verb, right, with who we are right now in July 9th? What day? 10th. I'm on vacation. 2017 seems like a noble cause. To be involved with the music of the here and now is something that has always resonated with me. Regardless of when I'm playing new music, of course, it's new music, right? It's music that is coming together, and so the connection to the present is very obvious. Yeah. But I very much adhere to the to this idea that the music that we play tells us about who we are in the present, not about who we were in the past. Yeah. And to me, when I play older musics, earlier musics, for example, I play a lot of 16th century Italian lute music. Oh, wow. I love the repertoire, and I play it for myself, but when I play it for different publics, I do it because for me it says something about who we are now. Yeah. And the older musics that interest me, the older performances of early musics that really compel me are those that really explicitly try to address where we are today.
Yeah. Well, what inspires you? I want to know what inspires someone like you. Guitarist, you speak so well on the spot. So what inspires you? What gets you going? Doing this every day.
Right. Well, I love sound. I love sound maybe more than I love music. This is a thought that I have a lot that I find inspiring, but also a little intimidating and scary, right? Because I call myself a musician. Yeah. No, I mean, of course I love music as well, but for me, I'm inspired by the sounds of everyday life. I'm inspired by the phenomenology of sound, and I am inspired by the incredible amount of work that peoples have done since time immemorial to organize sounds, explore relationships with sounds, attach all these meanings on top of just the matter of sounds. We can make them into musics, and we can make those musics mean something, and they have relationships to text, and so on and so forth. So just kind of the project that blossoms from a phenomenon that I already find incredibly sort of titillating and inspiring itself. I can just get lost in that and find inspiration all over the place. I know that's just a broad, abstract answer that
great.
Probably doesn't mean anything specifically. I mean, I think in a specific sense, to me, it's about drawing lines, about connections, right? What inspires me about a piece, when I wake up and think, okay, what do I want to work on today? Obviously, it's contingent upon what I'm hired to do, right? But what gets me excited to do it is to think like, okay, well, if I can realize this piece of chamber music with the people that I'm working on that are all so brilliant, and we can realize some sort of mission, right? Some sort of, we want our audience to think a little bit differently about the world, to see the world slightly differently than they did before they walked into the concert hall. Just the possibility, the potential to be able to achieve something like this is what gets me really excited.
You know what I read? I read that you competed, so you've done competitions.
A little bit.
That's one thing I have mixed feelings about, and I want to know from someone who's actually competed and been successful. What advice would you give young musicians who are competing?
That's a really important question, isn't it? I think I see competitions, as I actually see a lot of resources within our communities, as just that, just pure resources, right? They can be used for good, they can be used for evil. They can, of course, help young musicians launch themselves into the beginnings of a career, help make connections and so on and so forth. But obviously this comes at a cost for a lot of competitors, right? It's lots of people... well, shoot, I mean, you know all these things, but maybe just for audiences, right? People can suffer huge issues with their own self-confidence. The motivating factors behind, competitions aren't very musical, right? This idea of creating this platonic carbon copy performance that you can execute perfectly. This idea that you start with a certain arbitrary amount of points, whatever the hell those are, and for every little click or ding or squeak or buzz, you just start to lose points, and we rank people like this and compete them against each other. And the idea that you are narrowing down repertoire from the whole world's breadth of music down to a couple canonic pieces that aren't listened to for their musical intent, but rather for their technical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, these, I mean, I think that these are all anti-musical elements. And thus, I think, in general, taking competitions seriously is antithetical to serious music making. But can they be appropriated? Yes. And should they be? I don't know. I think so. For people that can do that without getting sort of wrapped up into the competitiveness, so on and so forth, just the shallowness of the competition world. I'm maybe not the best person to talk about this because I've done 2 competitions and got really lucky in both of them. That being said, I've hung out at competitions a lot. I like to go and talk to all my friends, make some new friends, drink some beers, commiserate about how competitions are silly, celebrate the best part of them. To me, the best part of a competition is if you participate, you practice really hard and you get better, right? You learn about focus and dedication and efficiency, so on and so forth. These are all, again, really important for living and working as a musician. So, I say go do the competition, practice really hard, go and enjoy yourself. It's also an opportunity to be on stage, which a lot of early stage classical guitarists don't have very often. Early stage musicians, I think, in general. It's an opportunity to meet new people in your field, see a bunch of concerts, travel somewhere. I say take the best of those things and run with them.
It's tough though. It's tough. Especially as a young musician. It's a really tough place. I've seen so many broken hearts. But
this is true.
Competitions are one way to get to a place.
Right.
Maybe you win, and I don't know how it is for guitar, but sometimes violinists and pianists have very successful careers after they win.
Sure.
What other ways can we make a career as a musician? How do you do it? How have you seen people do it?
Right. I think that we're at a really exciting time where there's more resources than ever to make your music heard.
Yeah.
At the same time, we live at a very paradoxical time because it is harder to scale those resources, right? If you want to share music with your friends and family, that is so easy to do.
Yeah.
If you want to learn, if you want to educate yourself or seek out education to take that further, it's never been easier.
Yeah.
It's never been more approachable.
Yeah.
It's never been more accessible. But I think the dream of making it big, whatever that meant when we were young, I think is harder and harder and harder to achieve. There's actually more significant barriers to that sort of, oh my God, millions and millions of fans thing that we used to see. So I think that in every era of musicians and people working in music, at least if I talk about the histories that I know best, which are mostly Western and post kind of white post-colonial histories, it seems like change is a constant and people adapt to their surroundings, and the people that tend to be successful are the people that say forget the rules and make their own paths, right? Yeah. There have been these pockets in time, these sort of blisters in time, where all of a sudden there's an infrastructure that seems to accommodate people, right? Yeah. The 1960s in the United States, if you're a symphonic player, you worked really hard, you might actually be able to land a good job, Same thing in classical guitar world, more kind of 70s, 80s, right? If you worked really hard, it wasn't hard to, do well at a competition or two competitions, get a teaching post within a couple of years, get some good students, get tours going, get reasonable concert fees, so on and so forth. These are just not realistic expectations, I find, anymore. I'm sure I, as well as you, we've had friends who have been very fortunate in that regard, but they're few and far between, and I think to set that up as a reasonable expectation or a reasonable sort of paradigm for young conservatory students is deeply misleading. Yeah. Let me see if I can trace my way back to the beginning of your question. So, careers, I think, to me, all the musicians, I think what every musician I know that works in music has in common is they're finely tuned to their community. Yeah. They go out and they get to know who else is making music in their community, and we take care of each other, right? I find musicians that are kind, that are punctual, that are responsible, that have good team working skills, that care about their communities. These are the people that maybe not, they don't make six-figure salaries, but they live and they teach and they live in music.
And they do what they love to do.
Right?
For the most part.
For the most part, right. I think, when you consider it a job, we start to realize how fortunate we are, even as difficult as it can be. To me, the musicians that don't get hired are those that are still following the old dream, the very conservatory undergraduate dream of I'm going to win the competitions, and a couple of them do, but most of them don't.
Yeah. So many of us out there. It's tough.
Yeah.
I want to go back to electric guitar, which is something I didn't even know you played till our interview today, because I always thought of you as an acoustic guitar, classical guitar player. So tell me about the background in electric guitar and what you do now with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So the electric guitar, as I mentioned, was my first love within the guitar world, the guitar family. And once I discovered again polyphony, I remember it was actually trying to read through the arpeggio section in the middle of the Bach chaconne on an electric guitar. The first time I heard that's when polyphony connected to me. And then I moved over to the classical guitar. And when I found the classical guitar, and I promise I'll go back to the electric guitar in 2 seconds. It's, the timbral possibilities, this infinite timbral sound world, all contained within an acoustic box that you can carry around and you don't need anything else. Maybe a footstool or maybe a music stand, but it's so minimalist and there's multitudes within it. I fell in love with that, and I feel so hard for that I moved further and further away from the electric guitar while I was at Cornish. I think I also wasn't making very much money teaching and playing local shows, so I ended up having to sell most of my electric guitars as well at various, tough points. that sort of end of summer stretch, right, where you're waiting for your new student enrollment and whatnot. And so I moved further and further away from the electric guitar. I did a couple things with it, when I was an undergrad, and thought, okay, no more. I'm a classical guitarist through and through. And I worked on the canonic repertoire, your Bach and your Albanese and so on and so forth. And until I thought I had erased all of the electric guitar from me. I thought I'd smudged it all out. And I showed up in 2010, September, and to my very first guitar lesson at Yale, and my teacher, Benjamin Verdi, he says, Grammy, because that's how he talks. And he says, Grammy, you play electric guitar, right? And I don't want to say no, right? But I'm thinking in my head, like, no. So I was like, I have, And he goes, okay, I need you to do something for me. I'm like, yeah, what's that? And he says, I need you to play a piece by David Lang at Carnegie Hall, okay? But it's on electric guitar. Can you do that? And what was I going to say? Like, no, So, like, all this, the last 5 years of working towards this identity as a classical guitarist, I kind of in some senses, threw all of that out the window right on the spot, And I'd saved up a bunch of money, because by that point, Seattle had been very kind to me, and I was teaching and playing a lot, and walked out of the lesson, walked to a guitar boutique, bought a Fender Telecaster, and started kind of reconnecting with the electric guitar. I suppose what has changed and about my perspective between then and now, and where I'm at with the electric guitar now, is when I went back to the electric guitar, I approached it as a classical guitar player.
Wow.
I played with my fingers, but not just with my fingers, with my head. My head was thinking as a classical guitarist, right? Where all of a sudden I became, I was bringing my skills as an interpreter. I was bringing my skills as someone who works deeply with complex texts and works with composers and, thinks like a chamber musician, whether a good or not chamber musician, that's not for me to say, but I was thinking in this way that I had been trained for, and moving forward with the classical guitar and the electric guitar, both of which I play kind of almost interchangeably now.
Wow.
I still think of myself as a classical guitar player, right? And play rock music and blues and so on and so forth for fun, but I'm not any good at it.
You're not in a rock band.
I'm not in a rock band. I'd like to be in a rock band. If anybody listening wants to be in a rock band, let me know.
Where are you now? Toronto, right?
I'm in Toronto. Yeah.
So how's the dissertation going along? How's the DMA program?
It's going well. I think DMA programs, as you know, are an interesting thing. Not to be too cynical, but there's this idea that the DMA can stand for doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I think that's just emblematic of music education in general, and when in higher institutions of higher learning, you need to make something of it for yourself. It is going to do nothing for you, right? So in that sense, I think the DMA Toronto is very much like many other DMA programs. I feel that there are students who are expecting or hoping that is going to be what helps them get the job. Or I think not students that are registered in the program, but I think that was a motivation for a lot of students to enroll in the program.
I see.
And then we get there and we understand, okay, well actually, everybody's getting a DMA these days, and there's less and less jobs, and with the neoliberalization of administration within university systems, there's going to be less jobs even still moving forward. So what do you do with the DMA? I don't know. To me, it's a couple of years to, take whatever classes you've always wanted to take and you never have. To build up your research chops if you haven't done that before. To get, if you can get some teaching experience and get some resources from your universities and financial or otherwise, helpful, useful resources. It's time. To me, the DMA is time to figure out what you're going to do, and how, again, you can set yourself apart in a landscape which is free but which requires you, I think, to make your own rules.
That makes me. This is something that I've struggled with. What can we do? I mean, can we change something in the music education to make it maybe not easier, but at least kind of give those people who actually come out with those degrees more opportunities? I mean, do we have too many graduate programs in the country? I mean, I don't know how to approach this, because it seems like, does every country you've been in Europe, do they have those same problems?
No, I think that they have different problems. Which is to say, I think that Rather, the thing that I see that is the same is that I see between North America and Europe is I see that musicians that think in a somewhat entrepreneurial way, that think creatively, so on and so forth. Again, just don't play by the rules and build their own stuff.
Yeah.
And there's really exciting things that are happening across the pond, really exciting things that are happening here in North America, as well as throughout the rest of the world. So I don't, the differences, the regional differences are that we have, I think, more graduates, performers doing graduate degrees out here in the United States and are hoping to teach because of that, right? Whereas in Europe, I think you got more performers who are thinking more in a sort of common practice way, and they want to, they want to end up in a renowned big ensemble. Or if they're going to teach at a conservatory. And I know lots of conservatories, it depends on what country you're in, actually hold auditions for teachers, right? Where you show up and you, where you should, they're like competitions. You show up and you perform, and they actually have, a chart, and they're charting you on your ability to play and whatnot. You get a teaching certificate, and there you go. And that strikes me as a very precarious way to hire a pedagogue, right? I mean, there's obviously these incredible teachers out there, but I don't know, it doesn't strike me as a holistic evaluation technique.
Is this something that leads into your dissertation?
A little bit. So my dissertation is concerned with new music guitarists, Canadian guitarists who play new music and also make a living. So I've been conducting field interviews with the guitarists that I respect and look up to the most across Canada who do this, and I just ask them about their skill sets that make them hireable and where they garnish those skill sets. Lots of times, again, like I was mentioning before, it's being able to learn music really quickly, being able to sight read, really good ensemble skills, knowing which composers are in town, and just getting involved with local projects, right? And of course, again, the conservatory tells you to do the opposite of all of these. So,
what are the current projects?
Oh, my current projects? Well, I just wrapped up working with the Toronto Creative Music Lab right before I came out here to the Northwest, in which we developed 10 new works by 10 international composers, 10 new chamber ensembles. Great pieces, really great performers, really great mentors, collaborators, so on and so forth. A lot of interpenetration, multidisciplinarianism happening with an ethos of kind of respecting creativity. It's a real good time. So
it's always great to have someone who actually knows how to play the instrument, is excited about new music, and wants to be there in the process. Because this gives composers who probably have never played the guitar an opportunity to learn from someone who plays really well and know how to compose for that instrument, what you can do, what you can't do. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten scores from young composers that's way out of the range of a cellist, for example.
Sure, or, of course.
They write something that's not possible for the instrumentalist to play. So it's always great to have people who are willing to take on these projects and be part of this. I want to know what you do for fun.
What I do for fun.
Outside of music.
Outside of music.
Nothing musical.
Nothing musical. Oh man. Well, one of my big projects right now is working for an education company that was actually founded by an ex-student of mine.
Okay.
He was just brilliant undergraduate at Yale.
Wow.
And he was taking classical guitar lessons with me.
Wow.
And often skipping them because he was staying up all night building the seeds of this education company.
Okay.
So our main product is summer camps, where we bring a bunch of interesting mentors in their 20s, usually from all around the world, and working in different disciplines. And we team them up with equally interesting high school students, mostly from developing countries, that have a bunch of ideas but have no resources upon which to enact their ideas. Right? So we hold summer camps in France and Japan and Romania and Bali. And I've been working with them for the last 5 years, meeting all these incredible people and traveling all around, and thinking a lot about education design and experience design, project-based learning. These are a lot of my passions, so I spend a lot of time thinking about them. My job with them now is to create a whole subsection of this program that's purely music specific. But you asked me not to talk about the music things I'm doing, so
no, go for it. Yeah, this is great.
So this idea, our program is called GACO, if you'll allow me to do a little bit of shameless self-promotion. I've drawn so much inspiration from this project-based, mentorship program where you just give people time. I think time is such a valuable resource these days. Just time and space to be quietly or loudly just curious and just think things through, right? As new music musicians, we never get enough time to rehearse. We never get enough time to do the things that we want to do. So giving people time in a beautiful place, more or less off the grid, where we can share with each other and just build things ourselves that we want to build and share them with the world. I love this model, and I want to find more ways to apply this model to music education. A lot of my thinking for a long time now, and I'm sure I have so many people to thank for this, but I can't, I'll try and rack my brains to figure out exactly who gets credit for this idea, because it's probably not mine. But this idea that, they tell us when we're in music school that our audiences don't know anything. They're empty vessels, right? And we can, and it is our job to educate them. And this is to some degree true. There are certain things that they don't know that we know, and we can share these things with them and illuminate their perspectives. But I find it inherently disrespectful and wrong, because I think that our audiences come to us because they love music and because they've been listening to music their entire lives very carefully, and they've been surrounded by all sorts of information, extra musical information about the content of music and its meaning their entire lives, much of which is erroneous, but you can say the same thing for you and I, right? And much of which is deeply, 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 deeply true. So, my program is based around some simple values. First of all, that our audiences are already incredibly well educated. Following from that, I want to design programming that does what it can to optimize what people already know, rather than to teach them things that they think that they don't know, right? I want to empower people to feel like they can't have intelligent conversations about music because they can already, right? So I don't know, I'm interested in finding, for example, simple ways of talking about music, of listening to music, of thinking about music that, again, just build upon the ways in which people are already sort of experiencing and feeling music. So the actual programming will end up looking like after-school programming for children starting in Manhattan in a learning center that we're going to open up in January, as well as daytime programming for people about our age who don't consider themselves sort of career musicians. They just love music, want to take a little bit of time out of their lives to work on projects. Someone that might come up to you or me and say, like, I love music, I've got this great idea for an electronic music project, I've got no idea what to do, right? And I can help connect them to people and resources that, give them 4, 5, 6 hours a week in our learning center. They can start to build these projects, as well as some artist residency programs and whatnot as well. So that's what I spend all my time doing when I'm not practicing.
Come on, you must be doing something else.
Well, I suppose, when I'm out here in the Northwest, I do a lot of reading and hiking. Just spent a couple of days out on the coast, hiking up and down the beaches out there. Yeah.
What was the Emmy award-winning? Share with us. I've done my research about you.
That was the easiest gig I've done in my life, and probably the most important couple of words in my bio, even though I really can't take any credit for anything. It's when I was at Yale, one of my colleagues is an incredibly kind, passionate, intelligent composer named Garth Neudstatter, and he approached me one day and said, Graham, I'm working on a documentary score. I'm going to be setting up a little ad hoc studio in this classroom, and I've written a simple little guitar part. can pay you $50 if you can come by and sight read it tonight, say sometime between 8 and 10. Does that work? It'll take 5 minutes, you know? Yeah, sure thing, you know? So go in this classroom, kind of a small wood paneled room with a decent sound, and he's got a little rack that he's wheeled up in there and a couple of Neumanns, and I sight read a couple different sort of pretty arpeggio patterns, and he apologized for the cheesiness of the music. It wasn't cheesy, but I understand, you know, he's a serious composer, and this was a film documentary, right? So he couldn't get as wild, I think, as he wanted to, and that was that. And I didn't think about it moving forward until I found out, you know, 5 or 6 months later that he'd been in some really big TV shows. What were they? Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, he kind of, from out of left field, ended up winning an Emmy for his soundtrack.
Wow.
For his From the New World, a PBS documentary with John Muir.
That's interesting. It's always interesting because every musician has some fun or interesting story to tell, and that's one. But any other ones? Maybe a string that, before getting on stage, you're missing one of your strings or something.
Oh, probably. Probably. I mean, there's a story that I like to tell about the first time I played a hard piece of music in 5/8, which was at Cornish. I think I was like 20 years old. I mean, it can't have been the first time, but whatever. It was a sonata by Leo Brauer, the Cuban guitarist and composer and conductor, among other things, and it was a difficult piece, and I learned it very quickly. And I was just doing my best to stay on top of this endless stream of eighth notes in 5, while there's a whole bunch of different sort of hemiolas and superimposed other rhythms. And so, practicing, I would just go hippopotamus, 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 playing along. Yeah. And I don't think that I managed to, completely exorcise that habit from, just my facial muscles by the time I did my first performance of this. And so I think my lips were still moving a little bit. And afterwards, a really, really kind person came up and said, "Graham, thank you for playing. I loved your performance. You know, in that first movement, in the sonata form movement, you just seemed so in tune, and it's like you were communing with the gods, and, what was going through your head?" And I didn't have the heart to tell them. I was just saying hippopotamus. But we all have stories like this, right? Where, technology doesn't work. I don't know. I was playing a concert 3 weeks ago or so, and on electric guitar, I lost power to my amplifier. Wow. So I just kind of really just tried to ham it up, and I was kind of kicking stuff with my feet, just doing. It was in the last couple of bars of the piece. And it was a bunch of sort of scratches and effects. So I just tried to finish it acoustically. I put my pinky nail on the string and scraped it as loudly as possible, just trying to project it to people. What you gonna do?
Man, this has been great.
Yeah,
anything that we missed?
Oh my gosh, I feel like we could probably keep talking forever.
Yeah.
Gosh, I don't know. I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat.
No, this is great.
For coming up to visit me, putting up with my animals running around.
This is great, and this is the first time I'm doing this, as I said, for this podcast. So it's great to actually do this in person. So I think we covered a lot, and thank you for joining me.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, man.
All right, that's it.
Cool.